So these are the two cards that we're going to be creating in this video today. So I really enjoy using double-sided tape with die cuts and glitter techniques. It makes a really, really beautiful wow card, and it's a different way of using die cuts as well as a different way of using the tape. So today, instead of using glitter with this, we're going to use some embossing glazes. So these are embossing powders that have a translucent factor to them. And we're going to be creating two different flower cards. This one here, we're going to add a stamped image before we do our die cut. It just gives it a different element, a little bit more interest. So let's start with this one here. So I've got my piece of paper for the front of the card. I've got double-sided tape. We're going to put it on our surface with the tape side up. And I am putting my cardstock down. I try to line one edge up with the edge of the cardstock. Sometimes it works perfectly, sometimes not, but typically it gets pretty close. So I'm going to use an X-Acto knife and a mat to cut off the excess. Now we're not going to throw away this excess, we're going to use it in a minute. And anytime I do something like this and I tape or cut off excess tape, I always use it. I use it to glue cards together, I use it for different things. This tape is not cheap, so rather than waste it, might as well use even the little bits that we cut off. A little sliver there. So let's get this out of the way. Now I'm going to take my die and I'm going to put it towards the tape backing, and we're going to be cutting through the backing. So when we do cut through the backing, we may get a little bit of the cardstock, and that's what that tape is for. We're going to use that on the back of the cardstock to hold any pieces that might fall out. So here's the machine. In this particular die, I can see exactly where the bottom of the die is, so I could just place my die cut where I want it on my card and then run it through. There we go. Now let's get rid of the machine. Now before we do anything, I'm going to take the thicker the pieces that we cut off. Before we do anything, first thing I'm going to do is do these sides. They tend to have little bits in them that want to fall out. So I'm going to put my tape on there, and over here there's a couple little bits that have already come out. I'm just going to leave it because chances are people won't necessarily see it. So anytime I'm doing something with tape, if there's a little bit that gets cut off, I always keep the bits for this exact reason. So any of the pieces that have cut all the way through the cardstock, I'm using my tape on them to hold them in place. It doesn't need to look pretty. And this tape, we're going to be going and we're going to be using it to glue our card together at the end, so it's not going to go to waste. All right, and my die just fell right out. What I do before I move my die is I check and see if any backing is stuck in there. That lets me know that there's exposed tape. But today I don't have any backing at all, so we're good to go. So let's take the sample here. We're going to work on a scrap piece of paper to catch any embossing powder. And this is the color selection that I used for the sample here. I got some of the new colors in. These are three of them. I don't know where the fourth one that I had is. So I'm going to swap out these two colors for these ones here. I just love the brightness of these two here, and I love all those purples and pinks together. So we're going to do this for this card. So I'm going to turn these up. The first thing I'm going to do is the sky. So the nice thing about the sky is it's a nice big area. I'm going to pick up some of the bigger sky area bits. Now there are some smaller bits, and You can try take them all off right now, but I'll tell you right now, you're gonna miss some. So we might as well just wait until the end and just fill in all of those little bits at one time. So to do this technique, you definitely wanna have a pair of tweezers that have a really fine tip to them, and they're ones that you hold closed. If you get the tweezers that are pressure, that hold themselves closed, there's not enough pressure to be able to grab that tape, oops, and hold it and pull it up. So just easier to have tweezers that you have to hold together, because then you can put whatever pressure you need to on it. And you definitely want a fine tip to this, because if your tips for your tweezers are not fine, you'll have a harder time getting in those areas of the tape. So we've got two more little bits here that I'm going to take off, and then we're going to put in the sky color. So I have light blue, it's a speckled egg. It's a pretty color for the sky. I'm pouring it generously over the whole thing. Put it to the side. Let's get the rest of this back in the container. And then I'm going to take a piece of my backing. Whenever I'm working with these tapes, I always keep my backing, because for this particular reason, we want to burnish our embossing powder right onto our tape. And what that does is it gives it really good contact with the tape. So then when I go, I'm going to get rid of that piece of backing. When I go and take a brush and I brush the excess off, I'm not brushing it off of the tape. If you don't burnish it right onto the tape, when you go and brush it, you do start brushing bits of it off the tape. So it does make a difference. And these pieces of paper, once I'm done with that color, I will toss them. We're not going to be using them for different colors. When you start using this double-sided tape, you get an excess of the backing, so it's always nice when it has a use. All right, one second. Just get some of the excess off of there. And now we're going to use our embossing gun and we're going to heat it. Make sure when you're doing that, you're doing your heat gun away from your hands. It does get quite hot. But typically the time it takes you to expose the next adhesive area is enough time for that powder to cool down. So I'm going to try not to touch that embossing powder. I'm using my X-Acto knife and I'm cutting where the stem meets my flowers. And some of these pieces you'll have flowers that go in front of other stems. I cut those areas too. Because if I were to take this backing off for the grass and the greenery, I would just be taking off the backing for the flowers. So I want to make sure that I am able to take those bits off, and I want that actually up here instead of the bottom part there. If by chance you shift another piece of backing, just put it right back down. And then I have one right here. This little bud here goes right in front of this other piece, so I just cut it to pretend that it was a flower in front of another flower. So we're going to take our backing pieces off by color. So I'm working darkest to lightest, and typically I would do the entire piece darkest to lightest, but by doing that sky, it makes it a little bit easier to be able to see where all these little bits are. If by chance we get little grains of our darker colors against the sky, we're just going to pretend that it's petals in the wind. One of the reasons we go dark to light is typically, if you are going dark to light, it's harder to see light embossing powder or light color on top of a black, but it's very easy to see the dark or the light on, or the dark over top of the black, or over top of the light. I'm mixing up my words here. So this little piece here is part of the stems. I want to keep that on there. Otherwise that stem is going to be the flower color. There we go. So this one here, on the sample I did it dark pink and, or sorry, dark purple and light pink. This one I'm going to do it with the two purples. And I'm using a brush to just pick up my embossing powder. I'm going to tap it on so that I have some dark areas and some light areas. If you're working one color at a time, you're going to want to burnish and then clear off your area. Because I'm working with two purples and I'm doing them on the same area, I'm not going to do that. But I'm also not going to keep the excess powder that comes off and put it back in the container. If I have a larger area and I'll be doing it on the bottom part, I typically have a scoop where I'll scoop up the powder. Because this area is so small, just by lifting it up with a brush, I have a little bit more control. I'm going to take my backing here, tear a piece off, make sure it's got some good contact with that backing, and then I'm going to brush the excess off. Some of it is going to stay on the blue just because it's a darker color and it's more visible. I'm not going to worry about it. Like I said, I'm going to pretend it's petals in the breeze. There we go. Close these before, I always close my powders before putting my heat gun on. Because even though that heat gun just emits air, I don't want to accidentally knock something over. Oh, I realized I've got this piece here that I wanted to do as well, so let's do that. And I typically do dark in the center of flowers and light towards the edges. You do it however you like. You don't have to do it exactly the same way. You don't have to do it exactly the same colors. This particular jar keeps giving me trouble every time I try to close it. So when you see me struggle with it, that's why. All right, burnish it, take the excess off. I'm gonna put that to the side so I don't touch it. And now let's heat it. And it's probably a little bit more challenging to see the colors or the powders melting on the camera, but it's very easy when you have it in your hand and you're looking straight at it. It's very easy to see that they're melted. All right, I didn't cut down there. And this one here, I think these are supposed to be leaves, but I turned them into flowers simply because I wanted there to be more flowers. And this backing is really, really thin, so it's super easy to cut it. You do see me holding it down close to where that backing is, and that's simply so that it doesn't shift while I'm cutting it. There we go. So now I'm going to do light pink and dark pink. So I'm going to do the same process. I'm just going to make sure my brush is clean because I don't want to have some purple still on there. There we go. Now let's do the light pink. The fun part about this is it's like painting with embossing powders, basically. It's just a nice way to use your dyes. It's another tool, or yeah, tool supply that is not cheap, so it's always nice to have as many ways as possible of using it. And this is one of those things that not a lot of people see, so it's got some wow factor to it when people do see it. So many times I've done it and people are like, how did you do that? And this is how. All right, let's move that to the side. Put my paper, and now let's melt that powder. So now that you know the general process, I'm going to be silent and speed up for the rest of this card. The green, I'm going to go from dark to light, and I'm going to do the green next, and then I will do any of the little bits of sky that got missed with that first, when I did the top part here. This is the second card here, and like I said, we're going to stamp an image first. This card is going to be much quicker than the other one simply because there are much less pieces. So this here is the colors plus clear that I used for this particular one here. For the demo, I think I'm going to swap that out, and I'm going to turn this into kind of like a I can't even remember the name of the flower right now, but I'm going to do it hot pink, and I'm going to do a smoky gray center just for something a little bit different. So once again, I am going to stamp first and then apply my tape. All right, now let's stamp the backing. So I'm using two different daisy looking dies here. I'll have everything that I've used marked down in the description so that you know exactly what everything is. And this particular stamp is a little bit different than the one that I used on the sample, but I just wanted to show the difference between the two. So now we put our tape on the backing. And for the rest of this, the process is exactly the same, so I'll just be quiet. I'll speed it up a little bit and just let you watch. So here are our finished cards. One the sample card and one the demo one with different color choices. Let me know which one is your favorite down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this type of creative content, don't forget to hit subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.